So this is a set of watch Forsaken Isles. It's the third in the set of watch series. So we have the first set of watch Swords of the Coin, which adds a merchant board, items, and coins to collect to buy those. And the third game, it's all new content, new characters, new creatures, new unhallowed, new locations. So there's no repeats with that, new items. And we also add a Doom mechanism. It's another way for unhallowed creatures to enter in the game. So Doom tokens will build up, and you get to remove those when you do rune actions. So if you ever have more than 3 Doom tokens, immediately summons an unhallowed. So that's another way for them to get spawned into the game if you're familiar with the set of watch or swords. So if you're not familiar with it, set of watch, all of them are fantasy survival games. We're trying to survive 9 rounds. 8 of those 9 rounds, one of the 4 characters, there's always 4 adventurers in the game, are going into camp and using their dice to do camp actions. They'll collect coins for those actions that can be spent in the merchant to buy items for themselves or the rest of their team. The rest will go on watch and have to deal with a line of creatures come in. They get revealed according to how well the fire is maintained in the camp. So the higher the fire, the more creatures you see. So the way you deal with those creatures on watch, one of 2 ways. You're either doing direct attacks, which are spending a die to meet or exceed that number in the upper right of each creature. So that's a 6, you have a 7, so you need at least 1 more die to someone to chip in for to beat that. It would go to the graveyard, and then you would move the line up and reveal the next creature according to the fire before anything else happened. So now you have a new puzzle to solve because you have 2 new creatures to deal with. And how they interact might be important. For example, there might be something that has a first position power that just got revealed, and you don't want to destroy that first creature now. You have to deal with that one first so it doesn't get to trigger its ability. I call it a combat line puzzle.
So like this one says reveal, so when it gets revealed,
that's when it triggers. Exactly. And they may have multiple abilities on them. One might be a reveal, one might be a first position. So those things will trigger as you move through the deck. So that's one way is direct attacks. I showed you spend your dice on them. The other thing you do is you spend your dice on your abilities instead to activate those. Once per ability per round, per watch phase, you get to spend a die on an ability to activate it. Some abilities are passive, they don't require a die, but they tell you how often per turn they can be used. But the ones you spend a die on can also be exhausted to do it a second time. Or if you wanted to save that die, I'm going to save this for combat, I'm just going to exhaust it and use that ability. So you have, because most you're going to use an ability with a die is twice a turn by exhausting it and using a die on it.
But once it's exhausted, it's done.
Once exhausted, it needs to be healed up, because that is actually your health. The way you lose the survival game is if anytime the player's on watch, all of those cards are exhausted for you guys, the game's over, it ends. You're done, you lost. Same thing if that unhallowed deck, these creatures, the boss monsters there, if all of those are summoned into the game and you have to summon a new one, it decks out, you lose. As long as you make it to the end of the game with at least one of these abilities active and that doesn't deck out, you win. So it's totally cooperative. Any other questions on stuff? I know I threw a lot at you.
To the unhallowed for a second? I'm not familiar with the game story.
Yeah, no problem.
What is the unhallowed here?
So basically, they're boss monsters you've defeated in the past. They're trying to be resurrected by their acolytes, which are other cards in the game.
Okay.
So as you go through, those will get summoned into the creature deck, which will cycle at least once during the game.
Okay.
So as those things cycle and ramp up, there's a chance if you let things get out of control and you don't manage it, you're going to run out of those, and they're going to get the deck's going to get more and more terrible.
Okay.
So they don't start in the deck though. You have one in the horde, which is the last round of the game, and then everything else happens during the game. The horde, you start with one unhallowed in there, and then every time you fail to complete a round, anything you can't complete damages you according to this. That's how many cards you'd have to exhaust from the players on watch, and then it goes into the horde to make the last round longer and harder.
Okay.
So anything you don't beat punches in your face, then you have to come back and beat it again later.
So is each version of this fully standalone on its own?
Yep, they're all standalone and they're all compatible, but it's always forward compatible.
Okay.
Because we add new mechanisms, you can play with the old stuff with the new mechanisms, but if a new character relies on the coins, for example, and you don't have them in the base game, you can't use that character.
Very cool.
There's an example of the characters from the previous game. So you see what the actual print looks like compared to the prototypes.
So here we have like the cleric, the rogue, the wizard.
Yeah, your classic archetypes.
Ranger, beastmaster, warrior.
Yep, and then it gets a little more eclectic on the bounty hunter, barbarian, witch, heretic, monk, and artificer.
Very cool.
And we switched up some of the mechanisms to make them a little bit more unique. Like, for example, I told you how you can spend a die on ability. Well, the Barbarian has 12-sided die, but she can only exhaust her abilities to use them. So they have to start becoming more unique in how they play as the boxes continue.
And you mentioned there was the characters are only future compatible, not backwards. So I can't use characters from this one in a previous set.
Not all of them. Some of them you
Some of
could.
them I can,
But
okay.
if you wanted to play any characters together, say whatever the latest box you have, use that as your core, and then just add whatever characters and creatures you want in. So you can do it that way.
Very cool.
So this one is going to have the mechanics from Swords of the Coin.
Yes, it's going to have the coin. It'll have the merchant, but also has a new one with Doom token. So if you wanted to go backwards and you're playing characters that have some abilities with Doom, you couldn't use those. So you always play with whatever the latest set is. Add anything you want into that. In fact, in this one we included a couple deck lists, so you can actually create some new creature decks, combining what we've put out so far. So you can play the same game with a whole different creature deck.
So I'm seeing Merchant, Golem, Sorcerer, or Sorceress, and
Corsair.
Yep.
Are there 2 more to make 6?
Yep, there will be. We're keeping them under wraps for now. The merchant obviously works with the items in the item deck. The golem has 12-sided dice and has charges that they can spend to keep their dice up higher, so it's more consistent rolls. But you only get those back when you go to camp. The fire sorceress plays with the campfire mechanic, so everything you do is going to mess with that up or down. So you get a lot of damage, but you can also mess with your reveal. The Corsair actually has the ability to seed cards into the creature deck that explode and take them out. So each one has some different mechanism to it.
So like there might be like a reveal thing where it's like reveal and then damage the ones next.
Exactly. Yeah.
Ahaha, very sneaky.
That's also a new mechanic for this game.
That's a cool mechanic.
But that's something that might not help you now, but it helps you down the line.
Yeah. Playing the long game.
Yep. With this Kickstarter, when we launch, we're also doing a campaign box and a big storage solution. So it'll take all the content we've produced so far and we put it into a campaign with a whole new box worth of content in the campaign. Where you go along and you unlock new characters, new items, and you have permadeath and lose people along the way, and you have to make do with what you got.
Sort of a lighter legacy.
Yeah, we call it Doom.
Easier resettable.
We call it Doom. Yeah, easily resettable. Doom run. You actually can save it as you go, so you can play like a half game, reset it, and then come back to it later. You don't have to play the whole thing. It allows you to play more like XCOM, where you lose people along the way, but then it's like, I really wanted to use that one, but now they're gone. I have to use this other guy instead.
And the big box will hold how many games?
All of them, everything.
Right.
Future-proofing
How many more?
Future-proof a bit. I mean, right now we don't have anything on the table that's in design-wise. Everything's been put into this, but we'll have room for some expansion stuff in there too. But yeah, everything will fit in there. We're also including with the third box a mini game. It's a half game. It's going to have its own unhollowed deck, so you can play in about half the time. It's a 5-round game, so you can set it up and get the same experience in about 40 minutes instead of an hour and a half.
That's great.
Okay. Is there a name for this one?
Forsaken Isles. It's not on that one. That's the prototype box. It's using the old one. We don't have any production stuff that's not home printed yet. Forsaken Isles and Doomed Run are the two things coming out. And that's it.
Very cool. That is very cool. I like it a lot.